ask the cameras to leave, please, and we'll get started. Members of the committee, first of all, I'd like to welcome the minister, but just an item that has been brought up to me by Mr. McGuinty, basically a procedural thing, and I'd like to just address that very, very briefly. And just to let you know that that when we had the initial communique to members, of course, we said that we were going to deal with main estimates, and the reason that I put that in was the fact that the supplemental estimates had been reported back on Monday, March the 19th. Our meeting, of course, was on March 20th. So my decision was to simply put that as main estimates. However, I should make it very clear that the minister had said he would talk about absolutely anything. So if the members wanted to talk about the supplemental estimates, the main estimates, the migration of turtles in the Galapagos Island, he was prepared to talk about that. So I did make that very clear. I then should also explain to the committee that I did attempt to talk to Mr. McGuinty about his motion. I sent a message to him in the House on Monday, March the 19th. I got a reply from Mr. McGuinty saying that he was too busy doing interviews and could not see me that day. At 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, we contacted his office, and I again was told that he was too busy to see me. I arrived at quarter to 11 for our meeting on Tuesday, and again, Mr. McGuinty was not here until after 11 o'clock. So I did have to do it through Mr. Regan, and did communicate that message. So just to clarify for the members, and as a result of that, we did send out, I asked the clerk to send out a new information after that motion was passed, simply saying that we would deal with the main estimates, the supplemental estimates. But again, I repeat that the minister has agreed to come back at any future time. We have until the end of May to deal with the main estimates. So today we can talk about the supplemental estimates. I'm not vetting any opposition members' questions, so obviously ask whatever you want about whatever you want and however you want, and all goes because the minister has agreed. Now, I must say that in my 14 years here, I haven't had the privilege of having a minister who said he would answer anything about anything in his portfolio. So I'm very pleased that he's here and is prepared to answer any questions that you want. So if the committee wants to talk about supplemental estimates right from now through the next 2 hours, I'm sure the minister is happy with that. If you want to talk about the main estimates, that's what you're going to talk about. So just to clarify the air, to let you know that this meeting is open. The minister is prepared to answer any questions, and just so everyone understands that. Mr. McGuinty.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I am reluctant to continue this debate, but having heard your introductory remarks, I'm now in a position where I have no choice. I'm deeply troubled by what's gone on here. I'm deeply troubled by the agenda before us here today, and I apologize to the minister that he has to sit through this, and I welcome him this morning. I'm troubled, and I know other members of the committee are as well. Let's try to clear things up, Mr. Chair, because you have opened this up from the get-go. Not once, but twice, this committee voted by majority decision to study the fiscal performance of the government for 2006-2007. Not once, but twice, the agenda for today's meeting instead read main estimates for 2007-2008. All of us believe in accountability, Mr. Chair, all of us. But you know that we can't hold the government accountable for what hasn't happened yet. We have until May, as you rightly suggest, to study next year's estimates. My colleagues and I do not want to hear from the minister on that today. This has been brought to your attention several times. And I think now it's only fair that a request be made to you to withdraw the main estimates for 2007-2008 from the order of the day. And if I'll take a moment, for example, just to recall the chronology. that led to the invitation for the minister to appear in front of this committee today. Before the break on Thursday, March 1st, I put forward a motion in committee that read the following: that with regard to a committee study of the supplementary estimates B for the fiscal year 2006-2007, the Minister of the Environment be invited to appear. During that meeting, the Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Warawa, suggested a friendly amendment. I'm sure he recalls doing so, to include the main estimates in the motion. He said that with regard to a committee study of the supplementary estimates and main estimates for the fiscal year 2006-2007, the Minister of the Environment be invited to appear. I refused at that time to allow this amendment. He recalls that. I explained to the committee very clearly that at that time that we could and should invite the Minister to come a second time to properly address the main estimates. I said, and I quote, "My thinking was, let us at least have the Minister come in the first instance before March 26th to talk about supplementary estimates B." This is important.
I apologize for interrupting. You know, I would suggest that so we can use the Minister's time, why don't you move what you just said, that we go immediately to item number 2, and then we've solved the problem.
Because that does not solve the problem, Mr. Chair. We've asked for a full 2 hours, and I think that something here very, 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 very troubling has occurred. Very troubling. When I go back to the first motion we put to this committee, it was passed after Mr. Warawa withdrew his friendly amendment, after I explained the motion was passed, voted on unanimously by all members of this committee, including the government MPs who sit in this committee, to do precisely what the motion asked for. After that motion was passed, a notice of meeting was sent out, and a unilateral decision was made to change the agenda, not to reflect the decision of this committee. Okay? In the wake of that decision to change unilaterally the decision about the agenda, we came back. The will of the committee hadn't been respected, so we came back with yet a second motion, which was debated openly on Tuesday of this week, just 2 days ago. 48 hours ago, we had another motion put asking again for the Minister to come graciously to be with us here for 2 hours to talk about last year, the year ending March 31st, looking backwards, holding the government to account, as the Minister knows. This is his job. Any Minister of the Crown comes to do this sort of thing at committee. Once again, I clearly explained the motion was to call on the Minister to testify exclusively on last year's expenditures, not on next year's predicted main estimates. Here's what I said last Tuesday to this committee before the vote on the motion, and I quote, "I think we're going to have plenty of time, Mr. Chair, until May, I believe, to do a proper review of this year's main estimates, and I think the committee will want to follow through with a separate study when the time comes. But I think that what we need and what the committee has asked for is a timely review of last year's performance. A reasonable request, I think, last year's performance by the government." The committee had a chance to debate the motion on Tuesday. At the end of the meeting, it was adopted 7-4. 7-4. So you imagine my surprise when an hour and a half later, I received yet another revised notice of meeting that again mentions the Minister will be discussing the main estimates for next year. For a second time, Mr. Chair, the will of the committee was not respected. I would even say that this was perhaps a premeditated act of defiance against the will of the committee. So here we have a situation. I go to you on Tuesday afternoon after the votes. I explain to you my concern about this issue. I discussed it with you on Tuesday evening, Mr. Chair. You said to me you were approached by the Minister's office, or the Minister directly, I can't recall which one, in fairness, and that he wanted to discuss instead the main estimates today. Now, if that's not political interference in the work of this parliamentary committee, Mr. Chair, I don't know what it is. We invited the Minister. He graciously accepted to come and testify. I thank him for his time. We want to get to the bottom of what happened in the last 12 months. We deserve, that's our job. We are elected as members of Parliament to hold government to account, and estimates is the vehicle, the primary vehicle at parliamentary committees. Now, committees are masters of their own destiny. This is a well-established practice in parliamentary practice. Members decide together which direction the committee will take, what issues will be discussed during meetings. No one but the members of this committee can take those decisions. No Minister of the Crown of any department can come to a committee and tell the committee what he or she wishes to discuss. It doesn't work that way. So before we go any further in this meeting, I need a clear explanation, and I'm asking for a correction. I'd like this order of the day to reflect 2 consecutive motions that were passed first unanimously with the government member support, and a second one on Tuesday, which asked the minister to graciously attend and come and speak to the last fiscal year ending 9 days from today. Because that is how you conduct an estimates process review, by holding the government accountable for what has happened and not trying to hold the government accountable for what might happen in the future. I am strongly in support of having the minister come back, if he would graciously accept, sometime before the end of May, so we can review the main estimates. Question for you, Mr. Chair, in closing. Why was the will of this committee simply ignored? Why did you attempt to attach our signatures to this agenda, which in no way reflects 2 open debates in this committee, pursuant to 2 motions tabled by the official opposition? Canadians would be forgiven for thinking that the minister doesn't want to be held accountable. I don't know if that's the case. I doubt it very much. I think he wants to be held accountable for the millions of dollars that were spent in the last fiscal year. We need 2 hours to be able to do this. We need 2 hours to be able to ask the probative and pertinent questions. So before we go any further, and without wasting any more of the minister's precious time, I'd like a clear explanation. Did you, for example, have any political pressure put on you from the minister's office or from the minister to change this agenda without informing the members of this committee, without putting it back to a vote, without bringing a subsequent motion to the floor? How did it come to be that 2 times in a row what we specifically asked for here in this committee has been changed and altered unilaterally by the chair? This is something Canadians who are watching want to know. This is a subversion of a very, very well-established democratic process right here on Parliament Hill. Standing committees. And I asked you the other day when we spoke, in your 14 years of distinguished service, had you ever seen this happen before? And your answer was to me at that time, no. You had never seen an agenda move without the acquiescence and support of the committee members. So I'm deeply troubled by this.
Well, Mr. McGuinty, first of all, had we been able to have that discussion on Monday when you were too busy to have that discussion, we could have probably solved all of these problems. I think right now you have a tempest in a teapot argument because the minister is prepared to talk about anything. He's prepared to go back and talk about those. It was simply in discussion with the clerk that we decided, okay, government members want to talk about the main estimates. Opposition members want to talk about the supplemental estimates. Let's put them both on there. And that was strictly a decision that we made. There was no discussion. There was no discussion with the minister's office for me or my staff. We did talk to the members, and basically I didn't think this was a big deal. And, you know, now that you seem to think it's a huge deal, obviously, I'm concerned that we're wasting the minister's time. If you want to spend the next 2 hours discussing procedural things, we're kind of getting used to that sort of thing, and I must say getting fairly annoyed by it because we got business to talk about. Let's talk for 1 3/4 hours now about the supplemental estimates. Let's get on with it. And that, I think, is the decision.
If you're prepared, Mr. Chair, if you're prepared to remove the main estimates from the agenda, you've got my support.
You got them removed.
Great. So
I said that at the start. We could have saved 20 minutes.
No, that's not what you said, Mr. Chair, whatsoever.
I said go immediately to item 2.
And so you're now saying that the agenda of this meeting has been formally changed to reflect the will of 2 motions passed by this committee. Is this yes?
I'm sure the minister agrees with that, and I agree with that. And
it's agreed?
And I think members agree with that. Mr. Warwa, point of order.
Point of order. Thank you, Chair. The motion that Mr. McGuinty is speaking to, there was no time limit on it. You have slotted or scheduled 1 hour to deal specifically with the supplementary estimates, which is the motion that Mr. McGuinty speaks to. There is an additional hour that the minister is willing to speak about anything. And so Mr. McGuinty has used up 15 minutes of his supplementary motion time. Now, so the motions that he speaks to are appropriately dealt with the agenda that we have before us. We just had a committee meeting where Mr. Speaker or Mr. Chair, the Liberals have tried to hijack the C-30, and now we see a continuing pattern where they're trying to hijack and delay this government moving forward. Mr. Chair, we need to listen to the minister. He's here. I don't want the delay happening anymore. And procedurally, what you have is accurate. There was a 1 hour allotted for dealing with the supplementary, which is totally in harmony with what the committee approved. But I will not allow, Mr. Chair, that.
We're now in debate. Mr. McGuinty, would you move, just a suggestion, would you move that we move directly to item number 2?
Mr. Regan.
Mr. Regan, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, this is a big deal. We're talking about the right of democratically elected members of Parliament to determine what this committee does. The majority of this committee, in fact, this committee unanimously twice has passed a motion. Was it unanimous Tuesday?
Unanimous first?
Unanimous first time, second time by majority, decided what to do. The members elected by the people of this country have the responsibility and the right in this place to hold the executive to account, to hold ministers to account. That's why Mr. Baird is here. That's why it's up to members to decide the agenda of this committee. It's not up to the minister to come and tell you what the agenda should be. It's not up to you to change the agenda after members of this committee have decided twice what we should discuss in this meeting. So, Mr. Chairman, rather, you're nice, Mr. Speaker, I know, but I want to tell you that I don't believe this is the kind of thing you want to do. That this is not like you, Mr. Chairman, to have subverted the will of the committee. I don't believe for one second that you believe in doing this. And I'm sure you regret the fact that you've taken the will of the committee, which was to have the minister here and discuss the last year, and change it to what he wants instead.
Mr. Collins, you've been trying to get in.
Chair, I'm going to suggest a way forward for this, so we can get on with today's business and respect the witnesses and the Canadian public who are flipping the bill for this. That if Mr. McGuinty has some challenges to decisions that you did or did not make, it's actually available to him in other formats to make them. I respect his concerns, but that for today, if the minister is in agreement to discuss the estimates, the previous government spending, that we proceed.
We'll proceed on supplemental estimates. We'll just skip the main estimates. Let's go right to supplemental estimates. You can ask whatever you want. The members can ask whatever they want. Let's get on with it. We have a witness here, and it's time to move on.
Everyone's agreed.
Has everyone agreed with that?
So we're moving on. The balance of the meeting, Mr. Chair, is the supplementary estimates ending March 31st,
It's whatever you want to ask, Mr. McGuinty.
That's not the question.
That's not the question.
Ask supplemental estimates.
Is it what the committee passed? Is the topic of this meeting what this committee agreed it would be, what we voted on, what we twice passed, or is it not? That's
It's
the question.
about the supplemental estimates, if that's what you want to ask.
No, that's not my. You keep saying basically we can ask about whatever we want, and that really means, Mr. Chairman, that the minister can talk about whatever he wants. We want him here to talk about his performance and the spending of his department over the past year. Why not? I'm making it a motion, Mr. Chairman. We've done it twice before. Why should I need to?
It will pass.
I don't have to make it a motion, Mr. Chairman. We've passed the motion twice already. I just need you to confirm that the rest of this meeting will be held on supplementary estimates ending March 31st of this year.
The rest of this meeting will be held on item number 2, and that's exactly what I started out by saying.
No, you didn't, but thank you very much for your clarity now.
Yes, Mr. Warwell.
I want clarity from you as chair. Will I be able to ask any question that I would like regarding the environment?
You can ask about migrating turtles in the Galapagos Island if you want to.
Thank you so much, Chair.
The issue with going to this. Technically, that's what it would be.
I think if you read item number 2, Mr. McGuinty's motion, that's what we'll be dealing with. And Mr. Baird, I apologize for taking your time, but if you could be brief, make your presentation, and then we'll get right to members' questions. Mr. McGuinty.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just heard 2 different rulings from you, sir. The first was you said to my colleague, Mr. Regan, that we would circumscribe this balance of time and the minister would hold his remarks to what he was convened here to speak about. And then in response to Mr. Warwell, you told him he could ask any question on any fishing expedition he wants to talk about. I'm sorry, did I get this wrong?
Mr. McGuinty, I can't vet the questions of members.
But no, I understand. But will this next hour and 40 minutes?
It will be on item number 2.
It'll deal with the motion. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Baird, Minister.
I can feel the love in this room. I'm very pleased to to be here today. I know at various other opportunities, this is my 6th year as a minister, and every other appearance I've had on the estimates tends to be a 2-hour question period on any issue that's of interest to members of the committee. Obviously, whether it's subs B, whether it's the main estimates for next year, obviously in short order the government will be presenting its PPPs, what are they called? Reports on plans and priorities will be coming out shortly. Obviously, the 2 principal vehicles with respect to accountability for how funds were spent are the DPR, which comes out in the fall, and that deals with the previous year's expenditures, and the public accounts obviously will be tabled in the fall, and that as well, I guess, follows up the main estimates from the previous year on how spending was conducted. I'm pleased to be here so soon after tabling of one of the most environmentally friendly budgets Canada has yet seen, a budget that responds to the #1 concern of Canadians, which is cleaning up and protecting our environment. This week, with $4.5 billion in new environmental funding, Canada's new government has injected a substantial amount of new money to support our environment. We put forward a substantial amount of money to fight climate change, reduce smog, and attack air pollution. As well, we're investing a clean water strategy and hiring more enforcement officers to ensure that our laws for environmental protection are enforced and that the health of Canadians is protected. And what brings me here today. As Minister of the Environment, my comments will focus on a wide variety of issues in the portfolio, which includes Environment Canada, the Parks Canada Agency, the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency, and the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy. I look forward to responding to your questions on these issues. I also understand that I'm appearing under Standing Order 1082, which allows members to ask wide-ranging questions, and I look forward to those questions. Joining me here at the table today are Ian Shugart, the Associate Deputy Minister, and Basia Arruda, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Environment Canada. We also have with us here today from the Department folks who may come forward where appropriate to answer questions requiring a more detailed or thorough response. As well, we have representatives from the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency and Parks Canada just behind me to my left. Canada's new government is serious about our environment and particularly about the issue of climate change. In her 2006 report, the former Environment Commissioner said, and I quote, since 1997, the government has announced over $6 billion in funding for initiatives on climate change. However, it does not yet have an effective government-wide system to track expenditures, performance, and results on its climate change programs. She contrasted that with what was actually spent, saying, and I quote, federal spending on climate change has totaled $1.35 billion. Our plan does not include announcing $6 billion in environmental spending and only following through with $1.6 billion. Instead, Canada's new government has invested more than $3 billion on clean air and climate change initiatives in 06-07. In the last 2.5 months since the Prime Minister asked me to take on this file, Canada's new government has made great headway in addressing some of our country's most pressing environmental concerns. Our actions have been driven by a focus on combating the devastating effects of climate change, cleaning the air that Canadians breathe, putting in place a better management regime for addressing chemicals, and delivering regulations that reduce the risk from pollution while ensuring that our economy continues to grow. As part of this government's environmental agenda, we have proposed legislation and gone ahead with several initiatives to take real action on climate change. The Clean Air Act, our Chemicals Management Plan, Eco-Energy, Eco-Transport, and Eco-Trust initiatives. These measures reflect the government's approach in addressing the environmental issues that Canadians and the global community are faced with today. For example, we recently introduced the Canada Eco-Trust for clean air and climate change, which includes more than $1.5 billion in new national funding. This funding will give the provinces and territories the support they need to initiate or launch new programs to reduce both greenhouse gas emissions and smog and air pollution. To date, we have announced projects in 6 provinces, 2 territories, and committed almost $1.4 billion towards the development of new technologies, energy efficiency, and other projects that will give us real results in reducing both greenhouse gases and smog pollutants. I'm looking forward to continuing work with the other provinces, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island, the Yukon, and Saskatchewan in the coming hours, days, and weeks. As I mentioned earlier, that our government believes in actions that produce results. Actions we have recently undertaken and confirmed in this week's budget include an investment in $2 billion in eco-energy initiatives that will help Canadians use energy more efficiently, boost renewable energy supplies, and develop cleaner energy technologies. $107 million on an eco-transit strategy that includes a series of initiatives designed to reduce the environmental impacts of transportation by making our transportation system more economical and more environmental. And finally, $1.3 billion to support public transit infrastructure with our municipal partners. For the first time in Canadian history, this government has introduced legislation which will enable us to regulate indoor air pollutants and outdoor air quality and greenhouse gases, establish national air quality objectives, and set standards for renewable fuel content and vehicle fuel consumption. This is a very important step for the health of Canadians. It is important because it will provide our government with the regulatory authority to reduce greenhouse gases, smog and air pollution, and let us enforce with strict targets that are necessary for Canadians today and in future generations. Members will recall that we committed last year to invest $300 million in the Chemicals Management Plan, a plan that will protect Canadians against harmful chemicals in our environment and prevent their reintroduction. We're also taking action to preserve our national heritage. Earlier this month, the Prime Minister announced $225 million to protect 500,000 acres of ecologically sensitive lands in southern Canada. As well, we've made significant contributions to help preserve and restore areas such as Stanley Park in Vancouver, the Great Bear Rainforest in British Columbia, I think in the great riding of the member for Skeena-Bulkey Valley, the Sydney Tar Ponds in Nova Scotia, and Point Pleasant Park in Halifax, the hometown of the member for Halifax West. Amongst many initiatives with Parks Canada, most recently we took significant steps to protect a major national historic site in the north, on the coast of the Great Bear Lake, and we announced investments to restore the Pacific Rim National Park Reserve of Canada on Vancouver Island. These initiatives, combined with tax incentives to landowners who donate ecologically sensitive land through the Ecological Gifts Program, clearly demonstrate our plan for the environment is all incumbency. The list I have just cited is extensive. What we have achieved to date will bring Canadians significant environmental and health benefits, but we realize that more can be done and that more must be done. I just returned from a meeting of G8 environment ministers where I participated in extensive discussions on both biodiversity and climate change with environment ministers not only from the Group of 8, but also from emerging industrialized economies such as Brazil, China, India, Mexico, and South Africa. When I spoke to my colleagues, I carried a message. In order to ensure global success in the protection of our planet for future generations, our actions must be guided by both environmental sustainability and economic prosperity. That's why Canada is taking significant action in a variety of areas to protect our environment and to tackle greenhouse gas emissions. That is why our government is looking at technology like carbon capture and storage and investing in energy efficiency in order to find real solutions to climate change solutions that will benefit both our environment and our economy. It's critical that the world not wait until Kyoto ends in the year 2012 to start talking about a new deal, a deal where all countries are at the table, addressing greenhouse gas emissions. Canada is not waiting until 2012. We are taking some of the most aggressive actions in the G8 over the next 5 years to address climate change. Obviously, we've accomplished a lot in only a few months. There's plenty more to do, and I can assure you that the funding set out in our financial documents will be critical to our ability to meet objectives. And I'll just, our Eco Trust for Clean Air and Climate Change is not here in the main estimates, but it will be voting on the Eco Trust in the budget. Secondly, if you compare Environment Canada's 07-08 estimates to the previous estimates, it might seem that Environment Canada's climate change programs have been eliminated. Mr. Chair, this is not the case. Climate change programs appeared under their own strategic outcome in 06-07. In our current 07-08 estimates, climate change programs have been integrated with the work of other areas of the department. Because air pollutants and greenhouse gases share many common sources, the government is taking an integrated approach to reducing these types of emissions. As a result, the majority of Environment Canada's climate change work is now part of the department's broader efforts to protect Canadians and the environment from the effects of pollution and waste. I want to emphasize to this committee that Canada's new government will spend more money addressing the concerns of Canadians about both air pollutants and greenhouse gas emissions in 07-08 than the last government did in any of their previous budgets. The last significant change in the estimates that I'd like to mention is the apparent $55 million decrease in funding for the Department's programs that deal with toxic substances. Though it appears that the Department received significantly less funding for programs to address toxic substances in 07-08, again, Mr. Chair, this is not true. In 06-07, funding for Environment Canada's air pollution was combined with funding to address toxic substances. In 07-08, funding for Environment Canada's air pollution program was aligned with funding for climate change, again reflecting our integrated approach. The shift to align air pollution money with climate change money is why it seems that the Department received less funding to address toxic substances. In fact, together, the funding to address toxic substances and funding for air pollution program is just under $250 million a year, which works out to an increase of about $51.3 million from last year. I'll skip over, in the essence of time, comments I was to make on the National Roundtable on the environment and the economy, the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency and Parks Canada, but I would underline they form critically important parts of my mandate as Minister of the Environment. As Minister of the Environment, I'm guided by one fundamental principle: protecting and improving our natural environment. These estimates will help the Department of the Environment and its portfolio agencies do their part to make our country and our world greener. Together, with new spending in the budget, we will promote real action on issues that matter most to Canadians: environmentally healthy, sustainable communities, energy efficiency, and continuing sustainable economic growth. Mr. Chair, I hope this summary of Environment Canada's accomplishment and clarification of some financial issues provides the committee with insight that they have been seeking in areas of concern to the Department of the Environment. I'd be happy to respond now to questions that you or the rest of the committee may have.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I should have warned you. I have a little gray box here that timing. You were 11 minutes and 11 seconds. We'll try and keep on time as much as we can, and we'll go directly to Mr. McGuinty.
Thanks very
10
much,
minutes.
Mr. Chair. 10 minutes. Keep me on track. Thank you very much, Minister, for coming. And again, apologies for the opening here, but it is an important matter of democratic principle that we were discussing. Minister, I think I heard you say in your opening remarks, maybe I didn't catch it, but could you just let us know, and I think you've got the answers to this, and I congratulate you in advance if you do, how much money for Canadians watching did your department spend in 2006, 2007, ending March 31st?
Well, it's not March 31st, so we haven't spent it
roughly. So you're here to talk about last year's economic. So can you tell us? Can you give us the estimate?
We're here to discuss supplements B.
Right.
Last year's will be discussed.
Right.
I assume with the DPR and the public accounts, which are published once the end of the initiative in 06-07. Environment Canada, I think, received about $25 million with respect to climate change. This is part of a $3.336 billion that we'll spend on the climate change and clean air files, something that I think is crucially important.
I'm sorry, the total budget number again for the year is what?
For the Environment Canada specifically,
yes.
With respect to programs, about $25 million. With respect to
the entire department's budget is $25 million?
No, that's on climate change.
On climate change.
Yeah. The entire department's budget can't be confirmed until supplementary estimates B are passed, because obviously Parliament hasn't authorized that funding. So, I mean, you're asking me to predict what the House of Commons will do
Thank you very much.
in the coming week or two.
Very helpful. Minister, I want to go to what I call a number of clarity questions for Canadians. And you mentioned that you were in Potsdam just last week. At the time, you stated that Canada has a plan for climate change. And you said that Canada wants to join international talks on measures that go beyond Kyoto. Can you help us by letting us know what plan did you table in Potsdam for the G8 plus 5 meeting? What did you put forward as Canada's plan for climate change?
No country tabled plans with respect to climate change, but what I did outline is a comprehensive strategy to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce pollutants in our air. What I talked about was a major industrial initiative that would deal with just under 50% of the emissions that we generate in this country from greenhouse gas emissions. and I talked to them about the significant reductions that we would see across industry with our plan to regulate. I spoke at great length about our notice of intent to regulate and the significant amount of consultations we've had with environmental groups, with industry, with our provincial counterparts on greenhouse gas emissions. I was able to speak about other aspects of the plan that had been or would be announced with respect to transportation, what we're doing on vehicle fuel efficiency, what we're doing on renewables, what we're doing on energy efficiency.
Minister,
I spoke to them. Well, you asked me a question.
No, just in the interest of time, though. Just need.
No, but you asked
me.
You asked me our comprehensive plan.
It's my time to ask the questions. Thanks very much. I want to know, in all the elements you put forward, then you simply described them to your G8 and +5 counterparts as elements of a potential plan coming forward. Is that right?
No.
So you didn't table a plan, but yet you said here, I quote you, Canada has a plan for climate change and we want to join international talks on measures that go beyond Kyoto.
Yeah. Well, I didn't answer the first question you asked. What I said is that Canada has a comprehensive plan that, in many initiatives, have been fully put forward. Other initiatives, a significant amount has been put forward, and additional efforts were following.
Okay, so that's helpful.
No.
This country did not table a plan at the G8 +5. Is that right?
No country did.
I understand that, but this country did not table a plan.
At the G8?
That's right.
No country has.
Thanks. I'd like to clarify, Minister, if I could, what you mean by, quote, beyond Kyoto. When you say beyond Kyoto, we're going to join international talks and measures that go beyond Kyoto. Are you proposing that Canada achieve deeper greenhouse gas reductions than the Kyoto targets for 2008-2012 period?
When we say beyond Kyoto, I think we mean when at the end of 2012, there won't be an international convention on climate change. I think all countries, and certainly this was strongly Canada's view, is that we shouldn't wait until 2012 and then begin to have discussions which would lead to negotiations. I think Canada is very engaged with the Gleneagles dialogue that began when the United Kingdom had the presidency of the G8. They invited the other 5 emerging economies in, and I think there'll be a significant amount of work done between the meeting we had in the meetings that were held in Gleneagles, chaired by Prime Minister Blair, to the discussions we had in Potsdam. That will lead up to the G8 summit in Germany later this spring. I think many people are optimistic and hope to see some fruition, some continuation of those dialogues leading up to the Japanese presidency of the G8. We're not the only act in town. The United Kingdom takes some action. The European Union takes some action. I think the G8 Gleneagles dialogue with G8 +5 is probably the greatest potential for bridging the gap between the industrialized nations and the emerging economies.
So when you say then beyond Kyoto, then, Minister, what you really mean is that the government plans to go entirely beyond Kyoto, as in skip over the 2008-2012 period and not require a reduction in total greenhouse gas emissions until sometime after 2012? Is that what you mean?
Not at all.
So let me clarify then. Can you tell the committee and Canadians who are watching, and other than repeating the phrase beyond Kyoto, do you support meeting Canada's Kyoto greenhouse gas reduction obligations?
I believe we've got to. I believe the negative point. I believe the Kyoto Protocol was an initial first step on reducing greenhouse gas emissions globally. I think.
So you do support?
No, let me answer the question.
But you do or don't?
Let me answer the question.
I need an answer. I don't need words.
Well, you keep throwing questions at me, sir, and I'm prepared to answer the questions. You get to ask the questions. I get to answer them.
Fair enough. Give me the answer.
I think that all countries, I think there was unanimity at the G8 +5 that we need a protocol, an international global plan that goes beyond 2012, both in timeline and in emissions reductions. Canada strongly supports that. We want to work with the developing countries and the industrialized economies on a process that will lead to further greenhouse gas reductions beyond the Kyoto Protocol. Very important for
Canada. Forgive me, Minister. I can't get an answer from the question I put to you. Do you support meeting Canada's Kyoto greenhouse gas reduction obligations? Maybe this way, yes or no?
I support continuing efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You bet your boots I do.
Okay. So that's a no. This week you stated, quote,
why do I have to answer the questions? I'll just let you answer them.
Let me give you this quote from the Toronto Star. The initiatives you said, the initiatives the government is going to roll out are going to be among the strongest in the world for the next 5 years. March 18th. Can you offer us a brief list of those countries you feel the initiatives you're about to announce will better when it comes to the fight against climate change?
I don't know the. I don't know. I don't know on a 5-year calendar the 08, 07 to 2012 compartmentalized plans. I know that in Canada, like many countries, we're playing catch-up. I look at many countries don't have while signatories to Kyoto, didn't have a substantive amount of megatons of greenhouse gases to reduce. For example, Germany, with the going back to 1990, the East joined the West, so therefore there wasn't actually a significant number of megatons required to be reduced. Decisions made in France with respect to nuclear energy obviously were very positive for France. Decisions to close down coal mines made in the 1980s certainly yielded not insignificant opportunities for Britain in this. What I see is that between 2007 and 2012, I think under the plans that we're putting the final touches on with respect to industrial regulations, Canada will be reducing more megatons actively in our plan than I suspect most countries in the world.
Okay, so you're not able to tell us which countries you're actually comparing us to when you say we're going to be among the strongest for the next 5 years. Can you tell us, in your view, just shifting gears for a second, because you've often spoken about trading systems. It's a specific question, but you've had many months now to get on top of this. In your view, how effective can a domestic greenhouse gas trading system work? How well can it function in the absence of hard, absolute caps for the reductions of greenhouse gases?
We're going to be tabling or coming forward in short order with our plan on industrial regulations. I think trading can play a role in that.
Can we do it without hard caps?
I think I'll leave the announcement on those industrial regulations to when we make it. It'll be coming forward in short order. I do think that certainly domestic trading, or we're trading within the same airshed, so we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and ensure cleaner air would be more profitable than Canadians. I do have a concern that if we are sending billions of dollars to Russia and other countries of taxpayers' money, that Canada will be left behind on the green economy, and that concerns me.
So finally, Mr. Minister, then, just to confirm,
your 10.5 minutes.
Your government prefers intensity caps, correct?
Mr. McGuinty, we'll go on to Mr. McGraw, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, today, because you come so infrequently before this committee, we expected to hear good news from you on climate change. But we can only note today that you're dragging your feet just as much as your predecessor was, Ms. Rona Ambrose, on climate change. Your predecessor promised to table greenhouse gas reduction targets for large emitters by the end of 2006. That was the first promise, and the first promise broken. You also promised that targets for large emitters would be tabled very soon. Greenhouse gas reduction targets. It's now the 22nd of March, and no target, Minister, has been tabled. My question is straightforward. Today, are you not confirming that for greenhouse gas emission reductions, especially in terms of large emitters, you're dragging your feet as much as your predecessor did? Well, I won't comment on my colleague. You said that I don't come very often before your committee. Well, I've been a minister for only 70 days. And I believe this is the first time I've even been invited here. So I've actually come 100% of the times I've been invited. So that's quite a fantastic record. Well, then we'll invite you to come on a daily basis. We'd be pleased to have you here. Well, you extended an invitation, and I'm saying I was pleased to come and answer any of your questions. So to say that you're not coming very frequently, well, in 70 days, this is the first time that you have even asked me to come to answer your questions, and I came, and that's not bad. Well, no, that's not the case at all. We've had to raise this frequently with the parliamentary secretary in order to make it work, because for some reason our timing, our requests never corresponded to your timing. But could you please answer my question? When will you table targets for those large emitters? Well, I'm sorry, you made a few comments at the beginning that I would like to respond to. Now, I mentioned that I've only been minister for 70 days, and I said clearly that my priority was greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and that we would soon have industrial regulations. We have worked very hard on this, not only myself, but all my colleagues in the department. And quite soon, we will be tabling a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through industrial regulations. And it will be a good plan. But, you know, I've been minister for 70 days. That's not very long. Well, no, it's not very long. But we have before us a new government that committed to addressing climate change. And that is a lot. Well, Minister, let's move on to another topic. The targets. You made a choice. You stated it publicly. You said that greenhouse gas emissions reductions would have intensity-based targets and not hard caps. Within your department, it seems that there's a suggestion that there will be a 15% number. But there has been an increase in 179% emissions. So you're basing your system on intensity, but what that will do is actually fool the public, because you'll make the public think that you're reducing greenhouse gas emissions and that you're making those industries reduce their greenhouse emissions. But what you're in fact doing is allowing them to increase their emissions. And so in fact you're distancing yourself even further from Kyoto targets. My goal is to have true greenhouse gas emissions reductions. You say that's your goal. But will you not acknowledge that various scenarios have been presented to you for 15%, a 15% reduction target in the oil and gas sector, and that actually corresponds to an increase of 46%. So the approach that you're favoring, the approach that you're presenting to the public, does not actually truly represent a reduction, but it represents an increase. Are you willing to acknowledge that today? Perhaps it would be a good idea for you to read what has been published, what is public, before you draw your conclusions. I said that as Minister of the Environment, I wanted to achieve true reductions. Listen. I've listened to you over the past few weeks because you've been traveling throughout Canada, I think, quite a bit, actually. Rather than make your announcements here, you've been traveling throughout Canada making your announcements. Well, yes, in order to announce money, for example, for Quebec. Well, I'm going to use this opportunity to say that I hope that Quebec actually will come out winning out of this system, because it's not just because you've announced $350 million for Quebec that Quebec won't lose out eventually, because Quebec has made efforts in this area in the past, and industries have reduced in Quebec their emissions by 7%. And it's not true that Quebec will just sit back and accept $350 million and be satisfied with that if what you're doing, in fact, is going to penalize industries in Quebec. But I'd like to come back to my question. You've traveled throughout Canada and outside Quebec, and you've made your announcements. And this is what I observe. What you've done is make the same kind of announcements as the previous government did. Minister, what you've done, in fact, is just recycle old programs. And my question is this. How can you convince us here today that the old Liberal methods that were used and that in fact led to an increase in greenhouse gas emissions of 27%, how can you convince us today that what you're suggesting will lead to true reductions? Because, Mr. Chairman, all the minister is doing is take those old programs and recycle them. And even more so now, I'm sure the Liberals will pride themselves on advocating absolute targets. But what you're doing, in fact, is doing what Mr. Dion suggested when he was Minister of the Environment. You're using these old programs, Liberal programs, and recycling them. Would you admit that? Not at all. You've spoken about recycling initiatives. Well, under our Eco Trust Plan, this is the first time a province will be receiving money from the federal government for provincial initiatives in greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And premiers have told me that they have never received a dollar in this area before. And with your support, Mr. Bigra, we've been willing to spend that money as soon as possible through this Eco Trust. And that is the first time that a province would be receiving a penny from the federal government on this. I heard the needs expressed by the Quebec government, and I heard what you said in the House of Commons, and I heard the request for the Government of Canada should work with the provinces, and I am sure that this is the way of doing it. And we've given even more money to Quebec than you asked for. Minister, you know perfectly well that in order to achieve our Kyoto targets, we need more than money. The Liberal governments have demonstrated this in the past, because this money is going to lead and has led to an increase in by 27%. It's the wrong approach. Now, you've chosen intensity-based targets. Do you not think the consequence of that will be, on the one hand, it will encourage the oil industry, and second, that it will penalize, in fact, any sort of system of carbon trading? Europe has already said it. We need agreements. We need many agreements on exchange systems, and we need absolute targets to do that. So are you not, in fact, encouraging large polluters and threatening any sort of potential carbon trading system, which is fundamental in being able to achieve our Kyoto targets? Well, in response to your questions, I already said that my personal goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. That's an important goal. You're saying it's not only an issue of money, but with the new government, you need to make commitments. We made commitments to the provinces. Quebec requested money. We met that request. The Premier of Ontario requested money. We met that request. And we're also developing regulations. We're putting forward programs. We're putting forward initiatives. So we're working on this. We've already put forward several initiatives, and there are many more coming.
Members that it's fairly lonesome up here when you don't come through the chair. And rather than get into a one-on-one with the minister, if you could come through the chair just to make us feel part of these hearings. Mr. Cullen.
Through the chair to you, Minister, welcome. Thank you for being here. A question around effectiveness and accountability. How much money in these estimates was spent on fighting the growth of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada?
I think this year the Government of Canada will spend about $3.336 billion on climate change and clean air.
This year coming, the previous year?
This year.
What has been the total reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in Canada due to that spending?
The year hasn't ended, and it normally takes a year or two after for that information to be compiled. That's a system everywhere in the world. It's no different here in Canada.
Do you have any estimations as to how much your department was hoping to cut in greenhouse gas emissions for Canada? Did you set yourselves a goal in total tons of carbon dioxide?
I think we'll be coming forward with our regulatory initiative, which will speak to that.
Just to be clear, though, your government's been in office for more than 13 months. When you initiated these programs, did your department, did the Environment Canada or the Conservative Party in office set a goal for the number of tons you hope to reduce?
For which program?
the combined programs?
Well, I mean, you can, if you want to speak to the, the Minister of Natural Resources with respect to the programs that fall under his responsibility, or the Minister of Transportation. Like I said, we'll be coming forward with the industrial strategy, which will speak to reductions.
Your government did not set a goal in terms of total emissions to be reduced in this past year since taking office.
We'll be coming forward with our initiative, which will speak to targets.
Setting a goal after the fact is a strange way to go about things, but
I think we operate from the assumption that it's common sense that we get more people out of the cars and onto public transit if that's assisted with financial dollars from the federal government to help make the expansion of public transit. We see that as a good news. We see if we can encourage transit users themselves to do that. That's be seen as a good news. If we listen to the Green Budget Coalition on vehicle scrappage programs, on vehicle rebates for energy-efficient vehicles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. When I can recall not so fondly when Mr. Dion was in your place and I asked for effectiveness of dollars spent per ton. The government of the day was never able to produce that result. Canadians were never made aware of how much it was costing or how effective $1 versus another. Your government issued a transit pass as one of your main initiatives in the previous year. The estimations were that was costing $2,000 per ton. I don't even know if the government is capturing the estimates on how many riders actually picked up on that program. In terms of industrial regulations, in terms of limiting the amount that the largest polluters in this country are allowed to emit, does your government believe in a hard cap on the biggest polluters in this country?
We'll be coming forward with our industrial regulation in short order. I can tell you that it's my goal to see a reduction in greenhouse gases.
An absolute reduction?
Yes.
An absolute reduction?
Yes.
By when?
We'll come forward with that.
No. I don't know. I don't need to know when the date of when you're going to come forward. But when is your government estimating an absolute reduction in total pollution?
We'll be coming forward with our plan on industrial regulation, and we'll announce it at that time.
So, from what I'm understanding in your testimony today, that you will be moving away from intensity targets to a hard absolute
what I'm saying is that my goal is to see an absolute reduction in greenhouse gases.
Do you think it's fair? We've had a number of witnesses come before the Clean Air Committee from the industrial sector who have been able to reduce their emissions to far below 1990 levels. Do you believe that it's fair that the industrial sector, the large polluters in this country, as a group, commit to going 6% below their emissions in 1990 levels by the 2008-2012 period?
If life was so simple, when you do meet with industry, it's remarkable that virtually everyone around the table acknowledged that I've reduced ours by 50%, I've reduced ours by 25%, we've reduced ours by 10%. Yes, greenhouse gases have continued to go up.
Well, we know why, though.
Everyone likes to blame it on the oil sands, but I look at the facts and it only suggests 2 or 3% of the emissions in this country are from the oil sands. What I can say is I think we need a comprehensive industrial strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to push people to do better, to show constant improvement. I think that's important. At the same time, I think there is a role. You have come forward, and I appreciate your counsel and advice with respect to credit for early action, and I agree that that has to be a part. I don't know how, I'm not prepared to say today how big, but I accept your notion that there should be some credit for past action.
One of your party's greatest criticisms of the Kyoto process that was undertaken by the previous government was not a proper assessment of the economic consequences of decisions made, and we heard this even from a senior Liberal saying the same thing just recently in the newspapers, that there wasn't really a sound assessment of some of the decisions made by government. When you recently introduced I know you won't call it, but it's essentially a carbon tax on cars, the larger engines, the bigger polluting cars, do you have a list of which cars will be penalized by your new initiative?
We have, I can give you or get to you the efficiency standards which will be used to establish which cars.
But can consumers go online or ask you or ask any of us?
On the budget website and the budget hotline, a good deal of information is available on that. But I can get you the science, the standards we use.
So have we looked at the economic impacts on the Canadian auto sector in terms of the cars that will be penalized? Has anyone in your department or in the government done an assessment to say if we were going to penalize such and such a line of vehicles, some made in Canada, that there's been an assessment made?
I do know that if you look at the fleets that are manufactured in Canada, that often some gas guzzlers are built in this country, and I don't hesitate to acknowledge for any moment that reducing greenhouse gases in many areas that there is an economic cost. What we want to ensure is that it's balanced and fair.
So, in fairness and balance, why'd you go after the minivan, for heaven's sakes? Is it one of there are a few minivans made in Canada that are on your hot list, the list of cars that are going to be taxed?
We'll give you the fuel efficiency standards that we use.
And will
have to draw a line.
Will those fuel efficiency standards be applied to some minivans that Canadians are currently purchasing?
You have to draw a line somewhere, and
Sure.
I appreciate that's always a difficult line. We'll get you the standards, and I'd welcome your input.
I want clarity so Canadians can understand. Are there minivans that Canadians buy, that Canadians manufacture, that will be penalized under your system?
I'll get the numbers for you. I'll get the fuel.
So don't know, or
standards.
you know about
I have a
it?
minivan that's an E85, uses ethanol, cellulosic ethanol.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Congratulations for the purchase. The question is
Actually,
around.
Mr. Alcock purchased it.
Oh, Mr. Alcock purchased it. Well, we'll thank him when we see him. I'm not one to be superstitious, but 13 years of the Liberal government, and emissions went through the roof. 13 months of your government. I'm growing in my wariness of these numbers, because what were the total cuts? What were the total cuts? And I know you're going to talk about repackaging and all the rest that your government made when it came into office to climate change programs in this country.
Well, I can tell you that this year, the 06-07 year, we'll spend more than $3 billion, which is substantially higher than has ever been spent on climate change programs. There was often differences between what was announced and what was actually expended, and those numbers will obviously be reflected in estimates, supplementary estimates A, B, will be reflected in the public accounts and the budget documents, and you'll be able to see for yourself.
So going by some of these estimates, I'm only talking about cuts now, $9 million for climate change initiatives, $39 million for the Opportunities Fund, $35 million cut for the ethanol expansion program, $10 million for the green energy support, close to $10 million for ENERGUIDE, and the cancelling of the Climate Change Policy Directorate. Were those seen as initiatives that Canadians should celebrate?
The only one you mentioned there that falls within my own department, there was no financial savings. There was some reorganization done by the public service that did not yield any budget savings. I'm happy to ask my deputy to speak to it if you'd like.
No. Canada's commitments under the Kyoto Protocol require that we, on a specific calendar, produce a report to the United Nations and to the world body of what we have done to a certain point and what our projections are in the future to reduce our impact on the planet. Have we produced that report for the United Nations under your watch?
Yes.
Has that report been made public?
It's been tabled with the United Nations, and maybe, I don't know if it's been posted on the Internet, but I'm the first Minister of the Environment who can say Canada is fully compliant in our filings with the United Nations.
Congratulations. How late were we in filing that report?
Well, Mr. Dion was to table one on January 1st, 2006, in the middle of the election, and he didn't. There was one supposed to be tabled on January 1st, 2007, and it was a few months late, but they're both tabled now.
In developing your so-called Eco-Trust program, did you consult with the organization that's actually named Eco-Trust before you did it?
I think there was a bit of a confusion. We weren't aware of it. I'll be meeting later this week or next week with Eco-Trust Canada. They're, I think, personify the kind of initiative that was demonstrated in our funding of the Great Bear Rainforest, where they work with business, with the Aboriginal community, and with folks
I
in
know
the
the group well. They were quite surprised to find out that the government launched a major environmental program with a name exactly like their name, without. And this is a major group. This has been around 14 years or more in British Columbia, and the government didn't have its act together enough to check out the name, do a little Google search maybe before you launched your major initiative.
I had a very, very constructive and productive discussion with the board chair, and I'll be meeting with her shortly.
You're aware of Google, yeah?
Mr. Cullen, your time is up. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I apologize. Both our reports are on our website. And I appreciate congratulations for me being the first minister in many years to be fully compliant with Kyoto.
Didn't go
Report
that
to be
far.
tabled.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Warwa.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the Minister for being here. I found it interesting, Chair, that for the first 22 minutes, there was a lot of bluster and time, unfortunately, wasted on making sure that the only topic was to be, according to the Liberals, was questions based on the supplementary estimates, and yet there were no questions on that, which is quite ironic. So here we are, and we thank you for being here, Minister. I was extremely pleased when the budget was introduced on Monday the 19th. And when we had the Commissioner of the Environment come to speak to the committee, we had heard that the previous Liberal government had announced $6 billion of announcements on the environment and actually provided funding $1.3 billion. So there was $4.7 billion of phony announcements. Now, you've provided the 4.5, I believe, billion dollars in this budget relating to the environment. How does this budget improve on the Liberal plan?
Well, a lot was talked about. Very little actually. Very little rubber actually hit the road. I think the exciting thing about this year's budget is it does give us substantial resources. I think particularly to engage with the provinces. I think one of the challenges with Kyoto has been the lack of engagement with the provinces. The provinces have a co-shared responsibility on the environment. The provinces, by and large, have responsibility for electricity, which is one of the biggest, fossil fuel generation is one of the biggest emitters of both greenhouse gases and air pollutants. And I think that this signal with the Eco Trust of $1.5 billion is a signal that we want to work cooperatively with the provinces. I know both David Anderson, the former Liberal minister, and Christine Stewart, the former Liberal Environment Minister, have said that the former Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs was always very cautious and didn't want to push Kyoto because they didn't want to disrupt relations with the provinces. That was, of course, Stéphane Dion. Rather than not move forward on Kyoto because we didn't want to rock the boat with the provinces, we have a pretty active, exciting engagement with the provinces that reflects the differences in all of their jurisdictions. In Quebec, they're doing some work with geothermal. In British Columbia, they're doing some work with the hydrogen highway, which is very exciting. In Ontario, they're looking at a national electricity grid, working with the province of Manitoba. And I could speak to in Alberta, they're looking at carbon capture and storage, amongst a number of things. So I think you can see some innovation provincially that will be exciting and will be constructive as an effort to reduce greenhouse gases.
Minister, or through you, Chair, the question is how much that the Liberals spent in year 2005 on the environment. The figure that I have was only $500 million. Are you familiar with that figure?
It was very modest. Certainly, can you call up my ADM here to...
Yeah, that's for 2005 and 6 for climate change programs per se. We do have $512 million annually.
And just to
so that was in that 1 year.
Okay, thank you. And to reconfirm that when the target of Kyoto that the Liberal government signed Canada onto was to meet a target of 6% below 1990 levels, and it's now approximately 35% above that target. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, what concrete actions is the government taking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? You've already announced many programs, but what are your favorite programs that you'd like to share?
I think the one biggest initiative will be the industrial regulation. We put out the notice of intent, which in broad terms laid out where we intend to go, and we'll be following through that with the specific industrial targets for the short term. And I think they will be very aggressive. I'm not aware of any country that's going as far as we are, at least in the sphere of what we're looking at. I think as well, though, the engagement with the provinces is absolutely key. I think it's a constructive and open federalism, which I think is good. And I think it acknowledges that what Quebec needs is different from what Ontario needs. What Nova Scotia needs will be different from what British Columbia needs, and allows some flexibility.
Well, Minister, you've been able to accomplish in 13 months far more than the previous government did in 13 years. My question is how we get that balance between in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and pollution levels. The Cleaner Act deals with both greenhouse gas emissions and pollution levels, both indoor and outdoor. How important technology is. What is the balance to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for a cleaner environment? Some have suggested that we slow down the economy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. My understanding is that you're not supportive of that. How important is technology to...
I think it was acknowledged one of the real consensuses, big consensuses that came out of the G8+5 meetings are, one, on technology. That technology offers the very best hope for lowering carbon emissions around the world, or lowering greenhouse gas emissions around the world. And there was a second consensus with respect to the science, obviously. I think technology, where Canada can provide some real leadership is on carbon capture and storage. What's going on in Weyburn, Saskatchewan within Canada is very exciting. The carbon capture storage task force that we've established will very much be focused on how to deploy, and I indicated to other countries, particularly the Americans, the Chinese, that we're very keen to work with them on what we can do to share that technology. We have to deal with, obviously, substantively with intellectual property rights, but I think it would be a great role for Canada to play on carbon capture and storage deployment. Here in Ontario, my home province, we have 4 coal-fired generating stations. In China now, under construction, there's 134 being constructed. Now, I believe it's important for the industrialized world to show some leadership on reducing greenhouse gases. But if we can help on the technology side, an economy like China's, who needs 7, 8, 9% growth just to feed their population growth and people entering the workforce, with those 134 coal-fired generating stations that are being constructed, technology will be absolutely key. And if I think Canada can play a constructive role with others on issues like technology and carbon capture and storage. And that's certainly an area that I indicated our willingness to work not just with China but with the global community on.
Any time, Chair? Minute and a half. Thank you, Minister. I'd like you to comment a little bit more about the fuel-efficient vehicle initiatives. I think it's very important. We've heard from witnesses that about 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from consumer use, and now to provide an incentive to have so people can drive more fuel-efficient vehicles. The lower the fuel consumption, of course, the lower amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are coming out. So I love the idea. I drive a hybrid. I wish we would have had a conservative government when I bought mine, but anyway, can you just elaborate a little bit more on the green initiative?
The rebate for a hybrid or for an E85 ethanol car or van certainly is not the initiatives we came forward in the budget. We're not the first. This idea was part of the Green Budget Coalition by a number of environmental groups who came forward to the government with the idea, and we said yes. They're doing it in Manitoba. Gary Dewar's NDP government is doing it in Manitoba. I think it's done in British Columbia as well by the Liberal government there. And my only view is that, again, on rowing together, we could really get some steam behind our actions if we can pile on. So hopefully in Manitoba they'll have twice the incentive because the federal and provincial governments are working together.
And another $36 million to get old vehicles scrap program?
The scrappage program was, again, I think an idea brought forward by the Green Budget Coalition, the Clean Air Foundation, where it actually is a quick and immediate gratification on reducing greenhouse gases. When we met with the auto folks, the auto industry with the union, the Canadian Auto Workers President Buzz Hargrove, what they told me in some of these meetings is that it takes 37 new cars built today to equal the emissions of one car from 25 years ago. And if we can have a program that will assist getting those old cars off the road to encourage, incent that type of behavior. Some industries are already doing it with the Car Heaven program. GM is signed on, and so the Clean Air Foundation had some great ideas that they're already doing now. What can we do to partner with them so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so we can go farther, faster? And the great benefit of that is, of course, you get the twin benefits of both greenhouse gases and of air pollutants, which represents sort of the integrated approach that we like.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Warwell. Mr. Godfrey, 5 minutes for the second round, please.
Thank you. Well, welcome, Minister. We're here this morning to talk about the environmental record of the Conservative government for the first year, and we're using the mechanism of supplementary estimates to do so. Mr. Warwell has suggested that this has been a splendid record of 13 months, but I can't help just making this observation before I ask my first question, that every time you suggest that you've only had 70 days to do something, it rather suggests that your predecessor didn't do much in all of those preceding days before the last 70. Let me go to my question about the Canada Emissions Reductions Incentives Agency. You criticized the previous Liberal government in your opening comments for not spending money available, making money available and not spending it. This agency had available to it in last year $25 million for the purchase of domestic credits generated in Canada by an offset system, and $25 million of international credits generated in other countries that are parties to the Kyoto Protocol. So, in the spirit of vigorous spending and vigorous activity over the last 13 months, how much money has been spent of each of those $25 million?
With regard to Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes.
With regard to that particular agency, if that was the question, the decision of the government was to not spend any money, and so essentially that whole organization was being wound out.
So,
and we had discussed this at the Standing Committee in October of last year. And the reason why they're presented, I guess, in the estimates is just to provide a crosswalk, if you like, of what would have been spent had there been permission to go forward. But there wasn't. So,
just to summarize then, $50 million set aside to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or to purchase credits, no money spent. Now, this brings me, Minister, to your general view of purchasing international emissions. I understood from an interview you gave this week at the G8 that you now are seemingly changing your mind. So let me ask you quite directly, will Canada now participate in an international emissions trading system?
No.
It will not. So what were you trying to say?
I think there's three different ideas, two emission-based and one non-emission-based. One, obviously the Russian hot air credits, which I've spoke extensively about, I think are
all right,
not good enough for Canada.
Yeah.
Two are the international trading, which I have concerns about, because taking taxpayers' dollars in that, and we just deal with the one challenge of greenhouse gas reduction and not the twin challenge of reducing smog and pollution, which I have concerns with, plus Canada gets left behind in the green economy if all of our money goes offshore. I prefer the same airshed better. The third area, I suppose, could be related, but not so much, is the clean development mechanism, which some have asked me to consider, and I've agreed to look at it, and I have looked at it. There's only a very small number of megatons around the world that are available in the 08 to 12 figure, so it really doesn't offer much for Canada. But
you're not ruling that out.
I wouldn't rule that out. Mr. Layton spoke to me about this and asked me to consider it a number of months ago, and I said I would, but I haven't reached a conclusion on it.
Now, I want to come back.
It's more of the foreign aid type of. The CDM would represent more of a foreign aid approach, where there would be a noble public policy. If a different agricultural practice in an African country could yield to a reduction in greenhouse gases, but also provide better agricultural output, that would have us all. It wouldn't be ODA-able, and it wouldn't come. Well, it wouldn't be ODA-able. It wouldn't come through CEDA, obviously.
I just want to be clear, because you always do seem to return to this hot air credits, and yet the Commissioner of the Environment reports, in the 2005 plan, the federal government acknowledged this and specified it would recognize only green credits, requiring that all proceeds from the sale of surplus credits be reinvested in emission reduction activities. In other words, ruling out specifically, the previous government ruled out specifically the purchase of Russian hot air credits. Why is it that you keep going on about something that was never planned in the first place?
Well, Canada signed Kyoto Protocol. You voted for it, sir, and it specifically contemplated that. Your signature, Canada's signatures.
We explicitly said we would not do so. And
your signature's explicitly on the document which said you wanted to do it. I mean, if you didn't agree with it, why did you sign it?
We'll go on to Mr. Harvey, please.
I think it's unfortunate that we lost all that time at the beginning on trying to restrict the subject, and now the subject is just being broadened anyway. That having been said, I would like to put questions to the Minister and listen to the answers. I was surprised to hear that the most recent amount spent by the previous Liberal government in the best year was $512 million. Have I understood this correctly? Well, just to be specific, in 2005-2006, expenditures on climate change initiatives were approximately $512 million. Was that the best year or was that the worst year? Well, we haven't analyzed all the previous years, but we did analyze the last 3 years, and it was $512 million for 2005-2006. That was on 4 programs that focused on climate change. There was the wind power reduction incentive and the wind power and the partnership fund. That was also in their budget. Now, certain announcements were made, and I was surprised to hear the minister say that there were premiers from provinces who had said that for the first time they were getting $1 from this government. Did I understand that correctly, that this is the first time they have been getting money from the federal government for the environment? Well, I made an announcement in Winnipeg, along with the Premier, who was there, who wasn't Conservative, and there were journalists who were there, and I was asked, they were asked if they had received money from previous governments, and his response was no, they had never received any money. I did another announcement, and another premier said the same, that he was very pleased to have this money because he had never received anything from the federal government. So that really highlighted this government's commitment and understanding, in fact, of the fact that federal and provincial governments have to be part of a much more flexible federalism. It works in Manitoba, it works in Quebec, it works for everyone. It works very well in my province, with my Premier McGuinty, actually, who was very happy to receive that money. Now, the money being invested actually is how much? How much money is being invested in the environment?
And I'll ask the ADM to respond. The environment, capital E, is a department. The environment, small e, is an important responsibility that is a shared responsibility across the board, particularly with the Department of Health, the Department of Transport, Parks Canada, the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency. It's also with infrastructure, when we look at public transit. It's also with natural resources, which plays a huge role. Obviously, energy and the environment have a huge correlation. It can be with, I mean, I could go on. It's incredibly important. Fisheries and Oceans, obviously, has a very strong environmental mandate. Agriculture.
I don't know that you fully understood my question. My question is, how much has been invested in order to improve the environment in Canada? In terms of announcements that were made, the actual money that has been put forward for the environment. Well, perhaps I could just clarify. We have the main estimates here that announce the various initiatives. And in terms of the environment, and I presume you were talking about climate change initiatives, but it amounts to about $850 million. And in terms of Environment Canada, $67.3 million will be spent on those initiatives for 2007-2008. And where does EcoTrust fall then? Natural resources. So the Prime Minister made a decision, and I'm pleased to see that the official opposition has a similar system, and that is that they bring the sectors of energy and environment together, and that way they can deal with the most important stakeholders together. And it's through working together that we can achieve this. Mr. Lucier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, I'd like to start with the good news. We have learned through the Canadian press that you will be announcing in 2 weeks targets. I don't know if you were aware that you were going to be announcing that in 2 weeks, but it appears that you will be announcing targets for large polluters. How would you react to that announcement that has just come from the Canadian press? From your boss. It was Mr. Harper who announced that a few minutes ago. Did you know that?
Target plan, and like I said, it will be coming in short order.
Deuxième question, Monsieur le Président.
Second question, Minister. I would just state clearly that I work very closely on policy and through communication. My goal is communication. Minister, I'd like to raise the issue of wind power. You cut wind power initiatives, and I'd like to know if this is included in the 2007-2008 main estimates. Have you improved that program or restored it? By how much? By how many millions of dollars? Well, this falls under natural resources, and of course he will be happy to give you specific numbers, or I can take the question under advisement and present it to him on your behalf. Well, does the same then apply to horizontal grids between provinces? Does that also fall under natural resources, those transmission lines? No, myself. It falls under myself. Then have any agreements been reached? Have there been any agreements between provinces, any draft agreements to connect these lines between provinces? Well, I believe we have 4 or 5 agreements that have not yet been signed, but our goal isn't to tell the provinces what to do. For example, the government of Quebec is responsible to its own population, not to us. And so before any of these initiatives were established, we talked to these provinces. Quebec had its own plans and priorities. And when something like this happens, the minister from Quebec comes to speak to me, describes their own plan, and I was actually pleased to see action that had been taken. And we were told by that government that they wanted more commitments from us to the provinces and that money be provided to the provinces. But provinces are accountable to their constituents, not to me, not to the federal government. And so I hope that you will be pleased with that flexible, open federalism. My question is this. In the 2000-2008 budget, is there a number, is there a certain amount of money that has been dedicated to that, to those lines between provinces, those transmission lines? $100 million? 200? I'll say it in English.
We front-end loaded our commitment to the provinces, so it's all front-end loaded. They'll get that. That money will go into the EcoTrust. with your help, in the coming week and a half.
So,
and the national grid has been identified as a priority for Ontario and Manitoba. I'm not sure where Quebec stands on that. I know they had an initiative to expand the grid between Ontario, but that preceded the EcoTrust initiative.
donc c'est inclus dans le 1,5 milliard.
So that's included in that EcoTrust, $1.5 billion. Well, those are the priorities of Manitoba and Ontario, so that's how they'll use that money. Now let's come back to cars. You mentioned $2,000 for these cars. Will that be retroactive? That $2,000 rebate? For example, will it benefit Mr. Warwell's purchase? No, it won't be applied to his purchase? No, unfortunately. I spoke to the mayor of Brandon, Manitoba. He bought his car 3 days before the announcement, and unfortunately he won't be receiving that rebate either. We should have waited then. He should have waited.
Mr. Minister, for coming here today. I want to follow a little bit of the line of questioning on the provincial side and the relationship with the province. And looking at the supplementary estimates for 06-07, I see that we don't have a lot of integration and work with the provinces in that time, but I'm sure there's been a lot of work done in 06-07. So my first question is the amount of effort leading up to this year's budget in working with the province. And I'm also, as a second part of that, I know that provinces, I sure like to see money get to the level where people are better equipped and more nimble to deal with the problem. So I think these transfers to the province are certainly effective. So based on the recent announcements that we've made, and transit and lessons learned between 06-07 and the budget for this year, and certainly the announcements we've made for Ontario and the EcoTrust, could you comment with respect to the province's reaction to this change for EcoTrust this year, and how are the premiers reacting to this announcement?
I think it's a welcome engagement with the provinces. I hope we can extend it further to talk about what we can do. The energy, particularly electricity, is by and large a provincial responsibility. So I hope now that we put some money on the table to show that we operate differently, I hope there can be greater engagement with the provinces on a variety of initiatives, not just on climate change, but also on other issues. There's also going to be a real acknowledgement that the provinces are all at very different places. New Brunswick's energy mix in terms of their fleet is very different from Nova Scotia's. Quebec's is very different from Saskatchewan's. So we've got to keep that in mind. And I can say I've had very constructive meetings with a good number of my provincial colleagues, not all of them in the first 70 days, but I'm looking forward to, for example, meeting the new minister in your province.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. In the interest of some of the discussion that we've had before with respect to making sure that this money flows and not just announced, can you give me a kind of a timetable on when we anticipate that we'll be completing the rest of these provincial announcements and we've got all our ducks in order so that money will...
We're working very hard on that. We successfully concluded an agreement with, or discussions rather, not agreement, discussions with New Brunswick recently, and it was announced, I believe, last week by our colleague, the Minister of Veterans Affairs. I would hope in the coming days. There's just a few left.
Okay. Final question, Mr. Minister. With respect to some of the things that lessons learned from the Commissioner of the Environment's report that we saw in 06-07, when we saw virtually between 2008 and 1998 and 2004, a lot of money announced, nothing done, and we saw the emissions go up. One of the things that she talked about was coordination of the departments. Would you share, based on this past year, recognizing that you've only been in the ministry for 70 days, what kinds of things are you doing to make sure that you and the Minister of Natural Resources and whatnot are all on the same page and we're going in the same area, including the Minister of Agriculture, who has a lot of responsibility for the fuels file? I
think the creation of the Cabinet Committee on the Environment and Energy Security does allow a forum where you can have a group of ministers with significant overlap in their responsibilities or shared interest to collaborate together is productive. The Minister of Industry is obviously at that table because we're doing industrial regulations. That's a big issue. The Minister of Transport Infrastructure obviously has a significant role to play. So I think that's a principal policy or decision-making vehicle. The horizontal management and accountability framework are also important as well.
Mr. Cullen.
Thank you, Chair. The press are reporting that your boss today announced that in 2 weeks we'll have targets announced in this country. So a question I have about the process that the NDP created around the C30, the so-called Clean Air Act. All parties in this Parliament agreed to a process to move forward and put our best ideas on the table, and the ones that we can most support, and then put that back to Canadians, and at long last perhaps make Canadians proud of the work that MPs are doing on the environment for a change. The announcement by your government that you're coming forward with targets, does that not supersede some of the good work that we've entered into in good faith as members of Parliament, some of us here, to set targets and timelines for Canada, which is what the Clean Air Act is being rewritten to do?
I think I would acknowledge that the Democratic Party, your leader, you as critic, have certainly, with the idea of having a special legislative committee, of going to committee before second reading, was a constructive initiative. I appreciate the ideas and suggestions that have come forward, whether it's, I mentioned earlier, on early action, or Mr. Layton talking about CDMs. I think we're following through with the commitment we made when we released the Notice of Intent to Regulate concurrently with the Clean Air Act and the policy there. I think it certainly does put more meat on the bone. Supersede, I hope it complements.
I can almost guarantee that the targets that the NDP have proposed to change your government's bill will be more strenuous than the ones that your government will be proposing in a couple of weeks. Will you accept the work of the committee in setting targets and timelines for this country to get back on track with our Kyoto obligations?
I'll certainly accord full and due respect to the committee's wise counsel. I'd like to see the conclusions before I sign on. I think this would only be
goodness, though, this is going to be a bill of Parliament, though. This will be passed, hopefully, with a majority of the votes on that committee and then eventual Parliament. I don't know why that's due to your consideration. That's just law. And shouldn't you accept law? If you were to respect Parliament and the work of Parliament.
If it has to go, it's not law until it's passed. There hasn't even been a vote in the House of Commons on the bill. I would say. I guess I could ask you, if the Conservatives, Bloc Québécois and Liberals pass a bill that the NDP don't like, would you agree to support it?
Thankfully, we're in a process right now where I get to ask you questions. It's a great fortune of mine. Now, the question of a national retrofit program, particularly for low-income Canadians. There's a number of people living on the lower end of the economic scale that simply can't afford to make the types of changes to their homes, and as a consequence, disproportionately pay more for energy as energy prices rise. Will you reintroduce a program that will afford Canadians who don't have the means to fund this themselves to gain access to these types of changes?
There is an initiative at Natural Resources with respect to energy efficiency. I think that engagement probably best able to make to my colleague, the Minister of Natural Resources. I can say that we came forward with a budget the other day. We'll be coming forward in short order with industrial targets. The issue of climate change, efforts to reduce greenhouse gases, efforts to reduce air pollutants, smog and pollution. There will never be the final plan tabled on the table. There will be the need for constant continuing action to hear good ideas, see best practices, and come forward with additional initiatives. Not just today, but tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, 10 years, 30 years from now. I think the next generation, the next generation's generation will continue to work on this. I've heard those ideas, and they certainly are benefits to them.
Will you support our call for a just transition fund for workers that are affected by some of the policies brought forward by the opposition or by your own government when their places of employment are affected by government policies?
It's certainly an issue the NDP has come forward with. I don't want to see a subsidy to, a big subsidy to one particular sector. I think obviously when we come forward with industrial regulation, there is an impact when you regulate. We believe you've got to take a balanced approach, and I know the New Democrats have come forward with that, and I'm always interested in hearing what the New Democrats have to say.
Your government committed $200 million for perhaps the most devastating effects of climate change we've seen so far last year, the mountain pine beetle in Western Canada. Of that $200 million, approximately $11 million in total was spent for an airport improvement. How am I meant to go back to my communities in northwestern British Columbia and say that your government is doing what it takes to make the transitions necessary for their economies when they're on the front edge of what is being prescribed as the biggest ecological and perhaps economic devastation that rural northern British Columbia has ever seen?
Well, certainly it's one of, outside of the Arctic, it's probably the best example of the huge effects of climate change. My colleague, the Minister of Natural Resources, would probably be best able to talk to the specifics about the forestry industry and the pine beetle.
On Mr. Harvey. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Vellacott, were you next?
That was next, yeah. Next line. Thank you for being here, Mr. Minister. I appreciate, and it was a big celebration day for farmers, for rural people out in my province in Saskatchewan, particularly with the homegrown biofuels producers. There was, I think, a great boost for us and a real milestone day. I'd like your comment, I guess, in respect to the, and particularly the comparison, I guess, these renewable fuels initiatives, and how does that compare with the previous government and the Liberal record. I guess what I like is for my province here, province of Saskatchewan, and the monies that may in fact be available as people come forward. Iogen may be one of those in terms of that fund for $500 million for renewables there. Some $15 billion over 7 years. This was major good news for the province of Saskatchewan and rural communities all across the country, of course. So as we commercialize for the next generation here, I do commend you for that, and I guess I would appreciate a quick comment in respect to the whole Canadian biofuel strategy, if you have any kind of estimations in terms of numbers of jobs as well. Bushels of grain growing, maybe that's not your expertise. I'll maybe go to the Agriculture Minister on that. But if you have any sense of that, because to me it's huge in terms of my backyard, Saskatchewan. And appreciate your comment in respect to how that compares with the previous government, particularly and the Liberal record in respect to biofuels initiatives.
Great capacity for rural economic development, obviously, biofuels. Very exciting initiative that Iogen, a company that's located in the Grey Riding of Ottawa South. Iogen is really a world leader in cellulosic ethanol production. They've got a great demonstration plant. They want to build one. I think it's in Prince Albert, just south of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. One of the things I think is important is the new technology. How can we make it benefit Canada and the Canadian economy, particularly in the agricultural sector? There's great opportunities there. The cellulosic ethanol is really cutting edge, and I'm very excited about it. I've toured the facility 3 or 4 times over the years since I was a newly elected member of provincial parliament, and the real potential there for Canada to play a lead role. You literally have countries like the United States and Germany, fighting to attract Iogen, and we're going to work hard to make that part of the initiative if we can. We cited Iogen as a great example in the budget, and it's one that I'm very excited about. The great benefit there is it doesn't just take the corn; it also deals with the whole stock. But whether it's corn, the whole stock, whether it's canola, whether it's there's just a variety of options there, and we're excited about. My colleague, the Minister of Agriculture, has the lead on the file, but obviously the Minister of Natural Resources and I are actively engaged on it and are pushing it hard. I believe in ethanol, particularly cellulosic ethanol. Very exciting. Like to make a big investment in the riding of Ottawa South.
You're finished, Mr. Vellacott?
I'm done.
Yes. Mr. Reagan.
You didn't hear all the great things I was saying about Ottawa South. Iogen.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Reagan,
Mr. will allow me. Thank you, and nice to have the Minister here today. Minister, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Minister. On December 21st, you received a letter from the President of the Toronto Stock Exchange, Mr. Richard Nesbitt, a 10-page memo, in fact, in which he pleaded with you to keep Canada in the international trading system, the emissions trading system, for several reasons. First, because it will lower the cost of compliance for Canadian companies, Canadian emitters. Second, because it will lower global greenhouse gas emissions. Third, because it will help Canada participate immediately in the global carbon trading system, in the market. Fourth, because Canada's market alone is too small. So you've been forewarned on this issue by Mr. Nesbitt, President of the Toronto Stock Exchange, and every expert on climate change or on emissions trading that this committee or the C30 committee has heard from told us it would be foolish, in fact, for Canada to withdraw and not take part in the global carbon market. Now, just hours ago, the Prime Minister ruled out completely Canada's participation in international emissions trading systems. But you just said you're considering participating in the Clean Development Mechanism under Kyoto. How can you participate in something that the Prime Minister has ruled out?
I think I explicitly, first of all, on December the 21st, you say I received a letter. On December the 21st, I think it was the President of the Treasury Board, and I was sleeping in a tent on the desert in Afghanistan. So I don't recall receiving such a letter. I do know the Toronto Stock Exchange would very much like us to be involved in the international trading system. But what's good for Bay Street always isn't good for Main Street. And we don't take all of our orders from Bay Street, I say to the Honourable.
But if you say that you're going to take part in the Clean Development Mechanism under Kyoto, how do you do that when the Prime Minister has just ruled it out?
I think earlier in the committee, I think I said the hot air credits in Russia or Ukraine, I suppose, the international trading system and CDMs, I see as three different things. We haven't made no decision with respect to clean development mechanisms. There's only a very modest amount available to the entire world.
So what will the cost be to Canadian companies if Canada's not trading, if they're not able to trade internationally? Because you've heard from, about Mr. Nesbitt.
We'll come forward with our industrial regulation package. I have spoken with some people in other countries on this issue who say, you know what, with this market, it'll go to the cheapest available option to reduce greenhouse gas emissions wherever they be in the world. It's not all about that.
You're not at a loss for words, are you?
It's about reducing greenhouse gases. It's also about cleaner air, reducing smog and pollution. It's also about the integrity of those markets. Are they actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Some of the suggestions for those markets are shaky.
Okay. But do you understand that the cost of compliance will go up for Canadian companies because you're refusing to take part in the international market?
I acknowledge it would be a lot easier to send tens of billions of dollars abroad.
Well, that's the system. You obviously don't understand the system, and it's going back, Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's going back to what we used to hear from this minister and others in your government, Mr. Minister, through you, Mr. Chairman, who said that climate change wasn't really a problem, that the problem is smog, and we all acknowledge that smog is a problem, but we're hearing more and more the number one environmental challenge we face is, in fact, climate change. We know that the air moves around the world. It doesn't stop at international borders, the borders of any particular country. We know that it requires an international effort to combat it. People understand that, so why would you pretend otherwise?
Well, listen, let me respond. I believe climate change is the biggest ecological challenge facing the Earth in my generation and generations to come. I want to see Canada play a major role domestically and abroad to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. What I do know is that if we spent tens of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money in the other side of the Earth, while it would, if there was integrity to the exchange system, reduce greenhouse gases, it would do zero or close to zero to reducing smog emissions and pollution, whether it's NOx, SOx, particulate matter, VOx, here in Canada, because we share a same airshed just with our neighboring...
So is the President of Shell wrong, then?
I disagree with the President of Shell.
And why would you force...
I know the Liberals love to get in bed with big oil, but you gave them that big tax breaks to the oil sand. And...
Mr. Harvey.
My God, the guy's choking over there.
Mr. Harvey.
Minister, earlier, I was told that there had been about $800 million in announcements, but if I include eco-trusts and the other items, I get to $3.3 billion in spending. So are my numbers right?
In the budget, obviously, the support for the Eco Trust of just over $1.5 billion is there. I think it's $1.515 billion. There's also the funding for the Nature Conservancy of Canada partnership that we announced north of Toronto on preserving about half a billion acres of ecologically sensitive land in southern Canada. There's also initiatives with respect to the Great Bear Rainforest, where we're working with the province of British Columbia, working $60 million of privately raised money, much of it from outside this country, to protect a significant ecologically sensitive land. I believe it's in the constituency of our colleague, Mr. Cullen. So there's all kinds of initiatives, and it's making a real difference.
Okay.
Earlier, someone mentioned recycling programs. What's the difference between the Eco Trust and the previous program?
Me, ask Gary Doer. Ask Quebec. Did Stéphane Dion ever give any money to Quebec? Nada.
No, je parle pas d'éco-trust, là.
I'm not talking about an Eco Trust. I'm talking about an eco-energy program.
Highlighted by the Environment Commissioner, the $6 billion budgeted, only about $1.35 billion was ever spent. And that obviously is a concern to Canadians.
Okay. Et les fonds qui ont été
and the funds that will be given to families to improve the energy efficiency of their residences or their businesses. What would you say the difference is between this new program and any previous program?
I think significantly less percentage will be spent on administration, and more good work will actually be done on a dollar basis. And my colleague, the Minister of Natural Resources, could give you greater information on that.
Okay, non, c'est vrai, c'est pas de votre ministère. Okay.
Oh, I see. That doesn't fall under your department. Now, in terms of investments that will be made into technology, what can you tell us about that? Technology development.
Department at Environment Canada. My colleague Gary Lund, the Minister of Natural Resources, did announce in early January significant investments in research and development and in science and technology as well. What other initiatives? Obviously, there's also Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which has a significant amount of public resources in it as well. I guess there's a variety of departments. Transport Canada does a bit as well.
Left, Mr. Harvey.
Pardon?
You have 1 minute.
Another example I could give you would be that of the Task Force on Carbon Capture Storage in Alberta. There are great benefits that will be realized for not only Alberta through this, but also for Saskatchewan. And there's also potential for this in Ontario. It really depends on the type of geography of each province. It's something that involves not only research and development, but also how that technology can be marketed. It involves many related issues. How it will be paid for example. So we're looking into all of that. Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Mr. Bigra, I would just like to make a point. It's all very well to just state anything in this room. It seems to me that the Energy Guide program existed. Quebec benefited from it. And there were Équiterre, for example, that benefited from this and was responsible for enforcing it in Quebec. Anyway, I have another question. Montreal came to us asking for targets, for reductions, absolute caps, and for a carbon trading system. Europe stated clearly that that market is worth about $70 billion, and that it has allowed Europe to move towards Kyoto's targets. And it has an impact of less than 1% on their GDP. So, Minister, how can we convince you? We don't know what to do. This is an important instrument that is at your disposal, that exists within Kyoto, that involves a clean development mechanism, and it would allow Canada to improve its reductions and perhaps allow us to reach our Kyoto targets. Will you not acknowledge that those markets and those mechanisms exist elsewhere? They have been established, and it has helped other countries reach their Kyoto targets, and it has reduced, in fact, an impact on local economies, less than 1% on the economies of European countries. Is that not proof that a system such as that one can be established that will allow us to comply with Kyoto at a minimal cost to our economy?
Actual GHG emission targets today than certainly Canada does. Like I said, I believe that greenhouse gas reductions are best done so we get the twin benefits of clean air, reducing air pollutants, I think is a priority for Canadians, as well as addressing climate change. Plus, we get the benefit of the green economy. I think what Canadians want to see is real efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and not an exclusive effort to just simply spend, sending taxpayers' money abroad. I can appreciate there's an honest difference of opinion.
No,
I think in our notice of intent to regulate, we spoke to one of the compliance mechanisms. Could be a domestic system. I think I've spoken publicly. If we could do it with the same airshed, there'd be great benefit in that. We see many states in the northwest, many states in the northeast of the United States wanting to go to a system. So I think there's great potential there.
Mr. Chairman, the minister mustn't attempt to fool the public with its portrayal of our suggestions. We never suggested that hot air be purchased. We have never suggested that we take constituents' taxes and send them abroad. Can you establish absolute targets and establish a system that will ensure that Canadian businesses can benefit from those foreign markets? Because in using intensity-based targets, not only are you giving an important advantage to the oil and gas sector, but what you're also doing is jeopardizing a significant system that would allow Canadian businesses to benefit from foreign markets, and that would still allow us in Canada to reach Kyoto targets. So we're not asking you to purchase hot air. We're not asking you to use constituents' taxes. We're asking you to establish a system that will allow businesses to benefit from this. Mr. Bigra, you voted for the Kyoto Protocol, and it includes those mechanisms.
You signed on to intellectually, these mechanisms were part of it. So I don't think it's unfair to say that at all. I've acknowledged, I think, at this committee very clearly that I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see real reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. I've also said, you say the opposition parties in plural in your response. Mr. Dion had a plan where he was guaranteeing the price of carbon at $15, and taxpayers would subsidize it if it was above $15. That was exactly in Stéphane Dion's plan. Stéphane Dion had a plan that the polluter did not pay. The taxpayers paid for the big polluters, and I disagree with that.
Are you telling us, Minister, for example, if a country cannot reach Kyoto's targets, and as you know, it can be postponed to the second period, so are you telling us that because we supported the Kyoto Protocol, we hope that the government will put off those targets, those reductions targets? Let's be serious here. We have important, powerful tools that we can use to reach Kyoto's targets, and you're just torpedoing the whole protocol, Kyoto Protocol, with inadequate measures and with inadequate decisions on behalf of your government. Will you not acknowledge that not only do you not believe in those Kyoto targets, but you don't even believe in the instruments that are included in the Kyoto Protocol?
I don't believe in the hot air credits contained in the Kyoto Protocol. No, sir, I do not.
Thank you very much. I would like to certainly thank the Minister for appearing and his people. And I would remind members that any amendments that you want for the private members' bills, we need those. We need to get that completed and reported back before the end of this term. I also apologize to Mr. Rhoda for not getting him on. I think you're the only one, and possibly that's because of what happened at the start of this. So anyway, thank you very much.